There we go. Why don't we begin our meeting? It's a little after 7:30. Welcome to the main meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm currently the president of the Civic Fed. We've got some short administrative business to take care of before we begin our program tonight. I see DP Director Adam Ortiz has joined us. Welcome, Adam. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to see you. Happy Mother's Day. Happy very early Father's Day and everybody in between day. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure. First order of business is the approval of the meeting agenda for this evening. It's on page 2 of the newsletter. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Somebody?
Alan, I know this wasn't on the agenda, but Dick Hoffinger wants to present a motion on, I believe, Thrive Montgomery and the Missing Middle. So with respect to your agenda, I'd like you to give him the opportunity to make his motion.
Is there a motion to accept the agenda, approve the agenda with that amendment?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second?
I would second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? The agenda is approved. Next order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from the general meeting of April 12th. Is there a motion? It's on page 13 of the May newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the April general meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there a, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. The treasurer's report, Jerry?
In the last 30 days, we've only gotten one check for $15. We're approaching the end of our fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. So for next year, you're welcome to pay dues for next year. We now have a bank balance of $9,274.65. And we've had net income so far this year about $26. Any questions, contact me.
This is an opportunity for a brief announcement. Does anybody have any brief announcements at the beginning of our meeting for the good of the order? Well, hearing none. If you think of something, you can tell us at the end of the meeting. Adam, are you about ready to start?
I'm ready when you are, Alan.
Okay, well, this evening we are pleased to have as our guest the Director of Environmental Protection, Adam Ortiz, and some staff.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. It's great to be with all of you. I see a lot of friends and colleagues on the line. I'm joined by our Deputy Director, Patty Bubar, who's just a rock star behind the scenes. I know you all hear from me so much, but Patty's the one who stepped on and ensure all the trains are running on time. So the two of us are here with you tonight. And Alan, I was going to provide just sort of an update on some of the stuff we've been working on lately and some of the stuff that's down the pike. And I have that little list from you of issues that you wanted me to touch on, but before I get going, is there anything in particular you wanted to make sure that we addressed in our time together?
Well, one of the things I think would be most useful for our members, this program is being recorded, is some of the services and grants that DP might make available. I'm particularly interested in sort of the rain garden, stormwater being one of my major issues. And I know there are county grants for residents throughout the county. So if that's one of the things, trees is another thing that we care a lot about. And I know the county's got programs for for trees, and on from the people on this call to their neighbors, so they could avail themselves of those kinds of programs. So it's all going to be very interesting to us. And you want to say something about the cicada outbreak and brood X? We'd be glad to hear about it.
All right, thanks, Alan. And just so I don't overstay my welcome, how much time do I have on the agenda? I can talk for as short or long as you'd like.
We'd like to ask some questions. Why don't we try between 30 and 40 minutes? Can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would get you to 8:30 at the outside.
Okay, absolutely, no problem. So on the stormwater and tree issues, one of the things, I'll first say that, I'm scrolling through the list of names here, and I see a lot of people who are doing a lot of great work in the community. And I want to thank them, A, and B, I want to say that there's no way that we can be successful in Montgomery County without the engagement of all of you and people like you. Protecting our environment, that's the name of our department, is really a all hands on deck exercise. The environment is a big thing, and it's a complex thing, and a lot of the challenges that we're facing are not new to us, but they're basically the inheritance of about management, from over farming to overdevelopment to chemicals and pesticides being unregulated in our department. And it's only really in the last few decades that we've begun to fight back, with the laws and court cases and a variety of our other legal means behind us, and the funding to begin to do it. But it's daunting. So, to your point, Alan, we need participation as much as possible. So, I'll talk about stormwater a little bit and trees a little bit, and then I'll provide a little bit more background on some of the other stuff that we're doing to hopefully for participants and members of the Federation to just get an idea of all the stuff they're doing to try to make a difference. So stormwater is a big deal, and Alan, you and I have known each other for a long time, connected in the water, and in Maryland. We're big on saving the Bay, and the Bay is a big deal, no question about it. But the Bay is, also includes Potomac, and it includes Tacoma Park, and it includes Olney, and it includes, every single inch of Montgomery County, because every single inch of Montgomery County is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And any bad stuff that's in the water most likely started off as bad stuff on the land. So stormwater control, controlling pollution from our developed areas is a key priority. And over the last 20 years or so, we've seen improvements in controlling sewage from wastewater treatment plants, big gains there. We've seen improvements in the agricultural sector, at least on this side of the Bay. Eastern Shore is a little more complicated, but we've seen a lot of controls there. But the area where we're still seeing a lot of pollution coming from is from our suburban and urban areas, our impervious surfaces. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of ambient pollution, so stuff in the air that settles on the land. There's a lot of bad stuff on the land that comes from leaky cars, oil, radiator fluid, you name it. And then pesticides and other chemicals, and all that stuff settles and accumulates, on the land or on parking lots or roads. And then as soon as it rains, all that stuff is washed into the near storm drain. And if it's not filtered with a stormwater facility of some kind, it's basically a pollution pipeline right into your closest stream, which goes right into, depending on where you are, the Potomac or the Patuxent or the Anacostia River, which then of course goes into the Bay. And we all know the problem associated with that. So the department has developed over the last 20 years a series, more than 20 years, 25 years or a little more than 25 years, a series of programs, and we're continuing to develop them to do everything that we can to control runoff pollution. And, you know, we have big projects, big stream restoration projects. We have green, but we also know that it's important for, you know, environmental protection starts at home. And, you know, every home has some impervious surface, whether it's your roof or your driveway or your walkway or what have you. And what we ask folks to do is to try to be mindful about controlling the runoff on their little corner of our world. And we have a program called the Rainscapes Program. It's run by a really enthusiastic staff member named Ann English. And if I could ask, you know, while I explain that program, Patty, if you'd be kind enough to find a link for the Rainscapes Program and perhaps put it in the chat for folks, that can be a resource. And if folks can access that, or if members after this meeting have questions about it, you can reach out to me or through 311 or through the website to get more information. But I'll talk a little bit about the Rainscapes Program. So the Rainscapes Program is, you know, basically a rebate program where folks can find ways to control stormwater runoff on their properties, and that can run from a variety of different projects. Some are very simple, some are more complicated, some are really relatively cheap, some are more expensive. But if this is something you're interested in doing, you can reach out to us and we will provide you know, guidance and oversight and some technical assistance to help identify what's best for your property. Some of the most common things that people do are downspout control. So finding ways to make sure that your downspout isn't running into your driveway or directly into the street, because that's the worst thing that can happen. Not only are you washing everything that may have settled on your roof or your driveway, but you're also increasing the amount of gallons of water that are running into your local stream. And why that's a problem is because our streams, you know, naturally were not meant to take on as much water volume in this day and age. You know, back in the day, before asphalt was and concrete was invented and suburban sprawl was invented, you know, the rain would come down and it would pretty much absorb roughly about, you know, where it hit the ground, you know, whether it was tree canopy or a meadow, you know, into the ground. But that, you know, now that we have this hard crust over so much of Montgomery County, the water runs off. So it's not, when that occurs, there's scouring and erosion that occurs in these streams that weren't necessarily made for those volumes. So a lot of you have seen, if those of you are hikers or been in stream valleys, you see a lot of places where there's these like little cliffs and then trees falling, you know, into the stream. And a lot of that is occurring because so much water is coming so fast, you know, more than, you know, historically it was expected to, and it's just scouring that away. That causes two big problems. One is potential for property damage, and we have 3 projects right now focused on just protecting people's properties because their sheds are falling, you know, into these ravines because their properties are slowly being eaten away. So that's a very, very real issue. And then the other one, and this is a little complex, a little sciencey, but all these chemicals and pollutants, not all of them, but most of them bind onto sediment. So they bind onto sediment, and then as that sediment is washed further down into the bay, it ends up settling into the bay, and that's when we get accumulation of chemicals into the bay because those little particles of dirt actually become vehicles for the pollution washing away, and then that's how. And then it gets very expensive at that point. So we want to reduce as much as possible the volumes. All right, so that was a lot of blah, blah, blah background. So what can we do about it? The Rainscapes Program really helps control at home. So the downspouts, we have programs to help you get a rain barrel installed. If folks have a rain barrel, raise your hand, or if you're familiar with what that is, a bunch of hands going up. You know, basically it's just what it sounds like. The downspout collects the water in a big barrel, and there's different sizes depending on your needs, or on the on the volume that's coming in, and then you can capture that water and then use it in your yard for your flower beds, for your gardens, or for your lawn, what have you. And that basically is trying to replicate the natural process. As I said earlier, back in the day, before the invention of strip shopping malls, the water would come down, would go into the ground. This is an attempt to recreate that natural process. So we're capturing it. So the rain barrel was not created by Mother Nature, but when people take it and spread that water around their gardens or their lawns or their yard, or their beds, that does replicate the natural process, and that does prevent this erosion downstream, but also absorption and processing of pollutants that may be in it. So that's a very simple one. It's very inexpensive. Other things that we can help with through the Rainscapes programs, explore the possibility of a small rain garden in your yard. And raise your hand if you've seen or have or are familiar with rain garden. Of course, a number of hands going on. So it's for those of you that uninitiated, it is basically a garden that collects rain. But it's but what's characteristic about it is that it's below grade. So it's sort of a catchment, serves as a pond, although the water doesn't really pond, but gravity takes the water there, and then it naturally filters into the water table, which is a much more sustainable way to do it. And inside of the garden, we can work with you to select plants that are bay friendly. So these are native species that thrive in the conditions, very wet, very dry, very hot during the summer, and also have ecological value. So they may be pollinators, or they may uptake nitrogen and phosphorus and other pollutants in a healthy way. So we will work with you, and we will also make sure that it is beautiful. So you have a nice asset in your yard. So we have literally thousands of people who have participated in the program. Also, if you're eligible, we can look at some other more intensive possibilities for controlling stormwater runoff on your properties. So it could be pavement removal. If you have old pavement that you don't want anymore, that's unnecessary, we can look to fund removal of it, or we can look at installing permeable pavers, and that's more expensive, so it's a little more competitive, but our staff can work and see if you're eligible for that. And permeable pavers, raise your hand if you're familiar or have seen or have held in your hands permeable pavers, but basically they look just like any other sort of hardscape paver or brick, except that there's usually spaces in between the bricks for the water to go down, and then there's engineering underneath where the water can naturally filter into the ground. So at the top, it looks pretty much just like any other hardscape that you would see, but in fact, the water can percolate naturally into the ground, again, trying to simulate this natural process. So, so that in a nutshell is the Rainscapes program. Patty, is there anything you'd like to add or anything you think I missed?
I don't think so. Not on Rainscapes, no. I think somebody put in the chat that they've taken advantage of it in the past. So I don't, yeah, Karen. So I think there's at least one person in the audience who's familiar with it, but no, I don't have anything to add. It's a great program. Such a great program. Sometimes we have to scale back on receiving applications while we catch up with the applications that we have, but we, want all the for people who want to take advantage of it.
Thanks, Patty. And I swear we did not contrive these testimonials that are appearing in the chat, but Karen or anyone else, if you want to speak briefly about your experience, that might be helpful.
I have a question for you, Adam, if that's okay.
Let Carrie go first.
I have a property, actually two properties adjoining each other, and the tenant
you know, if Alan has a property and then he has a rental, I think he can only use it once for one of his properties. Patty, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it has to be a primary residence, but the landowner, yeah. To answer your question, short answer, yes. They just can't use the program for more than one property. But yeah, Carrie, that definitely sounds like a candidate, and our staff would review the property and advise if it was a candidate. But from what I'm hearing, it would be
So I
competitive.
would have my tenant contact and English? And
Yes.
okay, and then it would be my credit for that property. Because I think he's doing it to both properties, but on one, he's going to put like 3 parking spaces, on the other, he's going to put 2.
Yeah, sounds like a candidate. Ann would have more information. Patty, anything to add?
Well, yeah, the only thing I want to clarify is rainfly for the rebate, but there's also a credit program under the water quality protection charge where you can apply for a credit that is the tax or the water quality protection charge that would show up on your bill, Carrie. So you can do both. You can apply for a credit so that your tax is reduced, and then you can apply for a rebate with Rainscapes.
Yeah, and that's true. Yeah, for folks, you know, in a business property, if you do some treatment, you can apply for a credit as well. So you can get some assistance on the rebate for a tax credit for, yeah, basically tax credit rebate. It's not tax credit, but a rebate for the project itself, and then an ongoing reduction in your fee. All right, other comments or questions?
Yeah, I just say it was very easy with my process. I used to have a sunny backyard and I have a tree that grew very big and turned it into a shady, mossy backyard. And I decided I found out about this program. I tried it out. Gave me a lot of help with picking out the plants and laying it out. It's growing very happily now. I spend most of my time at home now, kind of staring out my deck, looking at it and things like that. So. And it was, at the time, it was $3 a square foot that they would give you towards all the costs of the plants and so forth. I'm not sure if that amount has changed or not, but I got probably about 2/3 of the total cost of the project paid for. So I was happy.
I have a question. You make the application at 311?
You can reach out through 311 and you'll be put in contact with one of our staff who will guide you through the process. But there's also an application online, so you can do that as well. But if you have any questions at all, like, our team loves this program, so, and they love talking to people and answering questions. So
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of neighbors and myself that would like to replace the hard drive with something more permeable. But up to now, the cost was so exorbitant that I could not afford it.
yeah, exactly. It is expensive, and that's the idea, is that we kind of help make it work for people. Permeable pavers are expensive, so we're not gonna. It's not a huge percentage. It's not going to be like 80 or 90% that we could reimburse, but we will definitely make it cheaper if it's eligible.
Okay.
For exactly that reason.
Thank you.
And I've got a quick question. It goes to the nature of your cooperation between DEP and the Parks Department. How close is that cooperation? I'm thinking about a case of the parking lot of Sligo Creek Golf Course, which is in pretty bad shape. A lot of water comes off of that parking lot into Sligo Creek. They seem to have done some stormwater remediation around Sligo Creek Parkway, but it didn't take this large expanse of impervious surface that goes toward the creek. So what kind of cooperation do you have with Parks?
I'll answer that in 2 parts. That's a great question. We hear it a lot. We do, I think our coordination now is very good with Parks. I've heard that it has been uneven in the past, but we were on a call with them earlier today on coordination on our stormwater project CIP over the next 3 years. So we're doing a lot of planning going forward, and our staffs are working together. So that's the first part of my response. Second part of my response, Alan, is that they have their own program. So we don't have direct oversight or supervise their program at all. But if there is an issue or a concern that you want us to address with them, we're happy to do that. So we can
Well, it gets even more I was going to say it gets even more complicated because the golf course is operated by the Revenue Authority that they have on lease from Montgomery Parks, and it's basically in the parking lot's an environmental disaster. So maybe if somebody wants to go by and eyeball it, it'd be nice to get another voice, just raising concern both about the stormwater runoff, but also about the really terrible condition of the parking lot, which has made it a hazard for pedestrians because a lot of the pavement has sort of eroded away and there's huge potholes there. It's not very attractive either.
Okay,
Yeah.
happy to do that. And Alan, if you have any email history on this that you can send me, that can be helpful too. So I can.
I'm curious. I mean, Alan just reminded me of something here. How closely does your department work with staff at Park and Planning on, let's say, the Thrive Montgomery or these ZTAs that are being promoted with the growth policy? Because there's some real concern with respect to impervious runoff and reducing side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, all of that as it relates to like Lake Frank and Lake Needwood. I mean, overdevelopment caused the need for building a stormwater management pond surface, and today they're toxic. So my question is, does your department work with the planning staff on in a comprehensive manner on these proposals? Because I'm really concerned about it. I really think that we're heading for a serious threat to this county.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for that question. Trust me, I hear you. We have provided input to the Thrive Montgomery plan. I think all of our input is, probably what you would think it would be about sprawl development, about impervious surface, and also energy usage, transportation issues. We have a very dedicated staff, and each of our divisions have weighed in on the Thrive Montgomery plan. We don't, I don't know how to put this, but we don't have a lot of muscle, I guess you could say. We advise, and then they can take our advice or not. One of the things that we wanted, and this is consistent with what the county executive wanted in the Thrive Montgomery plan, is to have a dedicated environmental protection. We know that every single part of the plan there's a sustainability and environmental protection aspect, but we felt that it was important, given the challenges with climate change, to our waters, and to just the issues of waste management and plastic. It's a lot of these issues are very overwhelming. So we thought environmental protection deserved its own dedicated chapter tying all these issues together, because it should be a priority. That was not, at least I'm just getting back from vacation, so I might be a little out of the loop, but I'm quite certain that recommendation was not accepted. So, Carrie, like I said, we weigh in. My staff would probably say that we don't have as much influence as we would like. On the park side, I would say our cooperation is pretty good. It's very, very robust, and we work together and hash stuff out. On the planning side, I would just say it's not as coordinated, despite our best attempts.
I would request from you, Adam, a copy of the recommendations that you made to Park and Planning with respect to Thrive Montgomery and ZTA 2007, and its accompanying zoning text amendment. that wants to increase our growth, area 1 mile around the metro stations, a quarter of a mile near bus stations, because I think it makes I think it's very important, and I'd like to have a copy of it, because I've been arguing with the staff saying that it hasn't been comprehensive. The regional district act requires them to be comprehensive in their vision. And if I can have your report, that will go a long way in my argument.
All right, Carrie, let me see what I can do. I know that, and I'll have to do some homework since it was maybe 6 months ago or something, we submitted our feedback. And I can't remember if we did it through the county executive's office, but Patty and I will see what we can do and see what we can share with you. Trust me, I hear you, we hear you. And,
Thank you very much.
Jerry
You bet.
Garson, you want to ask your question now?
Yeah. Why is Montgomery County still burning garbage in a Dickerson incinerator instead of sequestering the garbage in a landfill and sequestering all the carbon for at least 1,000 years? We're in a tight time frame, and everything the county seems to do in Dickerson is designed to create more carbon dioxide.
Thank you, Jerry, for that question. I mean, under the directive of the county executive, we're looking at alternatives to the incinerator at this time and providing options. It's a tough issue because, although the incinerator clearly is burning material, landfills are also very problematic because instead of creating carbon, they create methane, and there's a lot of fugitive gases. And as you probably know, methane is, depending on your yardstick, between 20 and 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon. So we hear you. It's just a complicated issue, and we're working on alternatives now.
Well, I would refer you to the Fresh Kills landfill in Staten Island, where they have all kinds of pipes to actually capture the methane, and then they put it into the natural gas system and actually sell the natural gas and make money on it. So, I mean, it's possible. It's just we have to be creative in the landfills. And I know West Virginia has plenty of land that they probably even like the landfills because it provides jobs. But if we're burning garbage, why are we concerned about automobiles, which actually produce less pollution than the buses in Montgomery County that are basically running empty?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Well, one of the issues with landfills is that even the cap landfills that have capture have somewhere between a 30, depending on the age of the landfill, a 30 and a 60% leakage rate. So even when they're capped and some of that methane is captured and converted into energy, a lot of it still escapes. Those the membranes, the caps to the landfills are made out of plastic, basically. And what do we know about plastic? We know that plastic breaks down and turns into smaller and smaller pieces. So there's just not a simple solution. So like I said, we're looking at the options. There's just a lot of garbage in this disposable society. It's going up, it's not going down. And, our department is trying to be as responsible as we can on managing it. But there's just not a simple answer. There's recently by NOAA, NIST, and the University of Maryland looking at landfill emissions in the state of Maryland. And they're finding that the methane emissions are, almost twice what they thought they were. And in the anaerobic environment, so, that's a landfill environment, as you mentioned, it's capped, it's, deprived of air and oxygen. It's a, different chemical process that takes place and that creates methane. And, despite the best attempts to capture all that methane, what this data, from the authorities is showing is that it's much higher than we thought because there's just a lot of leakages in a bad landfill. So, like I said, we're looking at the options. It's a super complicated issue. It's super expensive issue, whether it's the Dickerson facility or whether we send the material someplace else. I'm just being honest with you, but a lot of bad options.
Then why does Thrive Montgomery want to add 20% more population to produce 20% more garbage?
Fair question. That's
So what,
that's one for the planning department.
why don't we use and sequester the CO2 out of the incinerator? That's done other places.
Yeah. So the Patty, feel free to jump in. The the incinerator is not quite state of the art in terms of its stack capture. There's different technologies to control the emissions. It's not quite at the state of the art, but it's maybe 1 or 2 steps down from state of the art compared to the Baltimore facility. For those of you, traveling into Baltimore on 395, you see the big facility, the Bresco facility there. It's far more sophisticated in our capture than that facility is. So we are doing some things to try to capture the material there. The energy is generated and we sell that energy to the electrical grid. Also, when the material is burned, we capture the metals. So the metals are melted, and then we have a system for capturing the metals, and those metals are then sold. So, it's garbage is an unsustainable, phenomena. But, we're trying to be as sustainable as we can be, under the circumstances. So, all I can say is we're trying our best, and we're looking at all the options.
And I have also another comment regarding the landfill. It's not only the methane, it's also what is going into the groundwater.
Yeah, thank you. And also some of you know that I worked in Prince George's for 8 years about the landfill in Prince George's. So the liners on the landfills are also plastic, essentially. So over time, they do break down. If you imagine just the sheer mass of pressure and weight, and over time, things break down, they compress. There's just a lot of opportunity for failure in the liner on the bottom and the cap on the top. So absolutely. Right now, we're about to start a $60 million remediation of the Goody landfill. So those of you who've been around for a while, your garbage was going to the Goody landfill for a while off of Goody Drive in sort of northern Rockville area. So that's a $60 million remediation because of groundwater contamination and other other environmental violations. So so yeah, this is my official word. It all sucks. It all sucks.
That's a technical answer.
That's my technical official position. But I will say that we're doing our best with just a tough situation.
Dick,
Jackie?
you have a question?
Yes. What about cooperation with Montgomery County DOT? The street that I'm in an R200 area, so we have open swales alongside the street. And I'm at the top of a hill, and we actually get some water running off of Lay Hill Road, so there can be a heck of a torrent coming down. And just to slow it down a couple of times, maybe 5 or 6 times over the years, I've built little dams. The property is 100 foot wide, so every 50 foot, I put in a little dam and it retains it. And it'll go for a couple of years until DOT comes around and removes it. Yet it seems like a very practical answer to slowing things down. So I don't know if you've ever had the discussion, but if we could register a little dam or however you do it, I don't grow flowers there or anything. It's lawn behind the dams. But to me, it's been effective.
Hey, I want to build on that. Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I was going to ask what kind of cooperation you get from DOT, because in my experience, they're frequently working at cross purposes with you. 8 years ago, my street was built by the county, and their design involved 10-foot wide swales on either side with stormwater intakes about every 200 feet. When we were going through the design process with them, I asked very pointedly, can't we have rain gardens in the swales to hold back that water and allow it to infiltrate? And they said, oh, no, no, no. Rain gardens are structures, and we cannot allow the residents, the owners of the property, to maintain those structures. So you cannot have rain gardens in the swales. Needless to say, most of the grass that was in the swales is being washed away year after year. That's
Well,
my
I'm-
comment on
I'm
rain
doing the
gardens
same
and how needed they are.
thing.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Number one, our coordination with transportation is pretty good now. Well, we were on a call earlier, so actually, I'll just back up a little bit. We're about to do around $40 million worth of watershed restoration projects, including green streets and swales and stream restoration projects and a variety of things. So this is a big bunch of projects that we're doing. We know that in the past, to your point, Margaret, there hasn't been a lot of great coordination that, somebody even, WSSC or part, they do these projects, they disturb a street or, or a stream valley or a culvert to do a project. And then the next department comes along a year later and then, does, something else in the same place. And that's not a great, our public entity should be more coordinated. So today, actually, we had the first coordination call for projects with WSSC, with DOT, with Parks and us,
Okay.
because we want to make sure that as we're rolling out our next portfolio of projects, that we're doing it in a thoughtful way, and that if DOT is doing a streetscape or a project in some area, we want to look at doing some kind of green street or some kind of stormwater control at the same time, since they're tearing up the area. And that might make our project cheaper, and that might make their project more sustainable, to your point. So we have had some successes in the past. I know some folks from Sligo Creek area are on the call. We had a successful collaboration a few years ago with the Green Streets project around there. I think that was a good sort of phase one on cooperation, but we want to do much more on a much bigger scale. So, on the particular swale that you mentioned, if you want to send me that address, I'm happy to check on with DOT on your behalf on what we can do to control the runoff there, and whether there's a dam or a rain garden or a reservoir or some kind of solution. Happy to explore that.
Hey, Dick, we're going to try to save the questions to the end of Adam's presentation so we can get some more information for our members. Adam, you've been talking about stormwater and Rainscape. What was the next thing you wanted to talk to us about?
Oh, thanks. Is this your polite way of saying I'm welcome already? I know I'm going over time. Forgive me. So I know we want to talk about.
No, I mean, we could talk about lots of things. I'm interested in solar and on county buildings. I'm interested in the CAP program. We're interested in recycling. We have lots of interest, but we thought that we should give you every opportunity to talk about the things that you had thought about when you joined this call before we start hitting you with questions.
It's all good. That's what we're here for. And if we don't get to everything today, I'm happy to come back another time and talk about more subjects. So, so trees, I know, is something that everybody's interested in. So we have a program, Tree Montgomery, that has been frankly overwhelmed with requests historically. And it's about folks getting trees on their private property. We have programs for trees on public property and the rights of way and, parks and stuff like that. But private properties don't have enough trees all the time. So we want to help people get trees. So you can find information. And Patty, if I could trouble you to find a link and put it in the chat for folks, that'd be great. But yeah, long story short, if you're interested in trees, or if you want to work with your neighbors or civic association or homeowner association, whatever, municipalities, please spread the word about the Tree Montgomery program. And it's a very successful program. We have great staff and great contractors to get the trees into the ground. And not only do we get them into the ground, but we help make sure that they stay alive for the first 3 years. And that those first 3 years are really important, because that's when they really, take root and become more sustainable. I see a lot of nodding heads. So I don't know if that's because you're all failed gardeners, or just because you know what it takes for a tree to work properly. But anyway, we're invested in the success of this program and trees. But there's a lot of information on the web. Patty is putting it up there. But please reach out to us. Great staff who love to help. And Alan, I'll take your cue. Just a heads up, we're doing a bunch of things. You mentioned the climate action plan. The climate action plan has been overwhelmingly successful in public engagement. The county executive wanted us to have a plan that had the involvement of the community, and we had approximately 200 members of the public served on different work groups. I think some of you were on some of those work groups. Then we opened it up for public comment. We received more than 500 pages, not 500 comments, 500 pages of comments that we're going through and responding to, because we want to make sure that people are invested in the plan. Because if we're going to try to make a difference on climate, we really need public support, because some of these things will not be easy. So that plan is very comprehensive, and it touches all sorts of issues. It's available online, so check it out. But in the meantime, we've been doing a lot of stuff anyway. We've been trying to handle all of the things that we could possibly do to make a difference on climate, and I'll just name a few. Mr. Garson mentioned early buses and trucks. We have a number of transit, hundreds of fleets of hundreds of transit buses that are running on diesel. And the county has purchased 14 electric buses that we're piloting over the next year to see how those work, how long they could run without being recharged again. And the contractor that we work with, actually, we passed on to the school system, and the school system has also made a purchase for converting their fleet to electric. That's no small deal. That's a pretty big deal. Also, we have, I think, 150 electric vehicles in the county fleet, and we're continuing to convert more and more vehicles to electric. You mentioned solar on county buildings. More than 30 county buildings have solar on them, including a building in downtown Wheaton. So those of you who have driven through Wheaton in the last year have seen a building going up. It's a sort of a rust-colored building, 14 stories high. I think it's the tallest building in Wheaton. If not, it's certainly the most unique-looking building in the downtown area. I was there today with Patty. That building is a LEED Platinum building. It has solar on it. It also has a green roof and is super-duper energy efficient. So we're continuing to move forward with that. Big project on, I mentioned earlier, the Goody landfill, which is, in recovery, very expensive remediation of that. But there's another closed landfill that we have. I think our theme is lots of garbage. That's the theme of my presentation today, but lots of garbage. But we do have a closed Oaks landfill in the northern part of the county. We're in the process of procuring a 6 megawatt system on that closed landfill. I believe that's, I'm being recorded, so I don't want to be misquoted, but lots of homes. I think it's 800 homes can be powered with that much, but I might have that number wrong, so don't quote me for those of you who are listening to the recording. But we're breaking it up that 2 megawatts are going to be available to the community. So it'll be a community solar project. So that's very unique. So that's a pretty big deal. Another big
quick question. What was the name of that landfill again?
The Oaks, like oak tree.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really excited about that. That's a big deal. Green building standards. So approximately half of greenhouse gas emissions come from energy usage, mostly buildings, and commercial buildings use the most, just you know, on a per capita basis. So there's two things that we're doing to address commercial energy usage. One is for new construction, we're requiring very strict, you know, basically European scale energy efficiency standards for new buildings. And that's going to council, and we'll welcome your support in supporting the new green building code. It'll be the most progressive in any county in the United States. We're excited about that. So that's for new construction. And then the next one is for existing construction. So there's a lot of buildings in Montgomery County, as we're all familiar with. Some of them are older and extremely energy inefficient. They're energy hogs. For 4 years now, we've been tracking the energy of large buildings by a law, the energy benchmarking law that was passed several years ago. So we have data on all the big buildings and medium-sized buildings in the county. So we know the ones that are using too much energy. So now we're introducing what's called Building Energy Performance Standards. The acronym is BEPS, and that will require over about the course of a decade, those buildings, all buildings, to meet a certain energy usage standard depending on their use. So hospitals will have a certain standard for energy efficiency that they'll have to meet. Schools will have to, laboratories will have to, shopping centers, department stores will all have to meet certain standards for energy efficiency. So we will be the first county in the United States to have such a law. Our proposal went from the county executive to the county council a few weeks ago. So it's over there, and that's a really, really big deal. So we're really, really excited about that. There's some other stuff happening in energy. Patty, is there anything else you want to mention on the energy side before I move to another subject area?
I don't think so, except on the building energy performance standards. That law was introduced, and I think there's a public hearing on June 13th or something like that. We can get the actual date, but the dialogue with the council will be beginning in June.
Thanks, Patty. So those are really big deals. And you know, one of the things about Montgomery, you know, as we all know, is it's a very, you know, environmentally conscious county, and that comes from environmentally conscious people and environmentally conscious leaders like you, which produce environmentally conscious politicians who want to take up these issues. So we think it's important that we do lead the country, especially counties, in laws like this. So this is a pretty ambitious law. There's only maybe 2 or 3 cities in the United States that have such a law, but we are the first county. So that's, you know, that's a big deal. I'll talk a little bit about watershed restoration. So I know there's a lot of water and stream people on the call. I mentioned earlier that we're about to launch our next phase of stormwater restoration projects. It's about $40 million worth of projects. It's a lot of projects, but we want to make sure, and we've done a lot of projects in the past. We've done more projects than any other county in the state of Maryland. As far as I know, I might be confident in saying that on the East Coast, we've probably done more watershed restoration projects than anybody else, just because we've been so progressive in getting things done. But for this next phase, we're going to be doing a couple things different. One of the benefits that we have in Montgomery County is that we have a very sophisticated biological monitoring program. And we actually have a team of biologists that are out in the streams all the time, in waders, taking water samples, counting fish, and looking at, you know, counting the amount of critters and bugs in the water as a measure of stream health. So we know the health of different streams, big and small, throughout the county. We also, of course, know where all the development is, and working with our team, we've been able to identify where projects would make the most ecological impact. So we have basically a targeting map, based on all of this data over these years. So we're going to be doing projects in places where they matter the most. Folks who are really into this stuff, like Alan, know that historically in Maryland, the counties have been required to treat impervious acres, as much impervious acres as possible, which is good. But an impervious acre out in Olney is not going to have as much environmental benefit as an impervious acre in Silver Spring, just because Silver Spring is more environmentally distressed than Olney is. So we're going to be more sophisticated in that way. The other thing that we're doing for this round of projects is focusing on equity. So we've taken a close look at the demographics of Montgomery County, and this next series of projects are going to have about 30% dedicated to what we call equity areas. So those are low income or high minority areas that most likely in many ways have been historically underinvested. So we want to make sure that we do restoration projects in those areas as well. So we're excited about this. We are in the very, very early procurement phase. So we don't have specific projects yet. We're going to be awarding it to a team of contractors, at the end of the procurement, and then we'll have an idea of where specifically the projects will be. So we'll remain in conversation with you about where these projects are proposed, and then we're happy to get any feedback along the way, because we'll have to live with these projects for a long time. So that's a big deal. Pesticide law, Alan, in your email, you mentioned pesticides. So the pesticide law is in effect now. I think this is year 3. So this is a ban on pesticides on lawns. There's a lot of good reasons to do that. You've probably heard them already, but just to clarify, it's not a ban on the use of pesticides, period. People can still use them to control invasives along border areas or on walkways and things like that. But it applies to lawns. So that's a little bit of a nuance that sometimes gets lost. There's lots of information on the website, but if we can provide more information or fact sheets, there's stuff on the website, but you can reach out to us on through 311 to do so. The last thing I'm going to talk about on water, and Alan, you can give me the axe anytime you want, because I know there's a lot of information, is we're introducing soon a bill on septics. There's about 40,000 septic systems in Montgomery County. Most folks on this call, I'm guessing, are probably on a sewer system, WSSC sewer. I see a big thumbs down for WSSC, no comment on my part. But some folks are on septics, but a percentage of septics fail, and then that creates major environmental issues and groundwater contamination, as mentioned earlier. So the best practice is to make sure that your septic is pumped out at least once every 5 years, because an overflow or a failure can really have major environmental consequences and consequences for drinking water as well. So we'll be introducing a bill to just require homeowners to make sure that they pump out once every 5 years, and we're happy to provide technical assistance for that. And then the last thing, Alan, if I haven't worn out your patience yet, I was going to talk a little bit about some waste stream stuff. Alan, you unmuted, so you can give me the axe.
I was going to say we could listen to you for literally for hours, because it's all good stuff. So I'm not pulling a hook or anything like that. So please, a couple of people have some questions, but yeah, please continue. And if you want to throw in something about invasives in there, that would be good for me.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So I'll take invasives. We don't have a dedicated invasive program, but we have super smart staff. Mary Travellini, who I think some of you know, she's a great speaker. If you want to invite her to speak to your group She also oversees the pesticide law as well, the Healthy Lawns program. So she's a great resource on invasives. Invasives are bad news, my friends. Anybody who has a yard probably knows that. So the best thing to do is do everything that you can to remove it, either yourself or with a contractor. The pesticide law does not apply to border areas or fences, so that is an option as well. We would just ask that all pesticide use be moderate and compliant with instructions. I know there's a lot of folks that are completely anti-pesticides. We respect that. We hear that, but we know that that might not be feasible for everybody. So we ask, if you do use pesticides, please use them responsibly. There are a lot of resources for identifying invasive species if you're not sure. Some of the most common, and people on the call I'm sure can have more knowledge than me, but English ivy is a big problem, Japanese switchgrass, another one, creeping Charlie, another one. So there's a bunch. I won't bore you to tears with the list, but there are lots of resources, and we do ask, it's not as high a priority as our department is controlling stormwater, for example, but to the degree invasives can be controlled, that's a benefit, because invasives compete out native species, including pollinators and species that that just work better with our critters for habitat and food. So more natives, the better; less invasives, the better. I'm going to talk a little bit about some waste stream stuff. So in the, actually, is it May? It is May. So May, the first phase of, Margaret's laughing at me. The first phase of our straw ban, plastic straw ban, has gone into effect. So there's the county council. This was our bill that we introduced, and the county council supported it unanimously, was to ban plastic straws. That goes into effect at the end of this year, complete ban on plastic straws. But starting on May 1st, a week ago, straws are only to be given to customers upon request. So we think that that's important too, because not only do we want to reduce the amount of plastic in our environment, but we want to encourage people to practice source reduction of plastics and pollutants. So if you don't need a straw, don't get a straw. If you can bring a straw, bring a straw. That's what we want people to do. You got to have a straw, we'll give you a straw, but it's going to be a straw that's compostable or biodegradable. So that law goes into effect. We're excited about that. Also, there's at the same time we passed a ban on number 6 plastics. So number 6 plastics are basically the same plastic resin as styrofoam. You might recall a few years ago, Montgomery County banned styrofoam because, well, at least 7,000 reasons. It's not recyclable. It easily breaks up into little pieces and becomes a major nuisance in the environment and in our waterways. Number 6 plastics are basically a more rigid form of styrofoam, but has all the same problems, not recyclable, and ends up costing the county, costing all of you a lot of money, because people think they're recyclable and then they put them in the recycling bin because they look and feel like many other types of plastics, but in fact, they degrade our recyclable plastic stream, and it ends up costing us money. So that goes into effect also later this year. So we're excited about that. But plastics are a major problem.
Can I ask, on the system of recycling, is plastic recyclable, or is it the case that if I'm separating out my waste and putting plastic in a container, it just ends up getting put in the landfill anyway? Or is Montgomery County still actually, what would you rather we did? Would you rather that we did actually separate plastic or not? You're muted.
So the short answer is yes, please recycle. We are recycling. Our recycling center is super busy, super active. We aren't doing tours at this moment, but I was just there a few weeks ago, and our team there is sorting and bundling, and then we're selling everything that that has value for in the market. So we're not sending stuff to the landfill or to the incinerator that has value. That being said, not all plastics have value, and this is a little bit of a point of confusion, but basically all plastics except number 6 and higher than number 7 and up are not. But in the meantime, best thing to do is look at the bottom and look for the recycling symbol. If it's the most you see the recycling symbol, put it in. There's a couple of exceptions. Often the recycling symbol appears on plastic bags, plastic film, that is not accepted in our recycling stream. And number 6 plastics, if there's a little 6 in there, we end up pulling that out. So basically, my guidance to you is, if it has a recycling symbol and it's not a number 6 and it's not a plastic bag, put it in the bin. But I know it's like, people are like, what the heck? Why does it have the recycling symbol if it's not recyclable? Exactly. So there's so Montgomery County is leading the charge on trying to fix some of these system issues. So what's happened, because this is a very unregulated area, is that the manufacturers can basically put the recycling symbol on just about anything, even if it's not recyclable. And so they do, because they want us to feel better about using plastics. And there's a great, if you're bored later tonight or sometime this week, you can look up recently there was a 1-hour Frontline documentary on the birth of the recycling system. And it's true that a lot of items have value. So I'm drinking out of an aluminum can, LaCroix tangerine. This is not product placement, but it is delicious if you're looking for a sugarless carbonated beverage. But aluminum cans, for example, get us about $1,100 per ton back to the county. So that's major revenue for us. Number 1 and number 2 plastics, also depending on the color, between $200 and maybe $400 or $500 for those plastics. So we do get revenue from some things, but then there's some plastics that aren't worth a thing. And that ends up costing us basically $130 a ton. So I know there's a lot of information. So what we're doing, and we had a call with the EPA last month, and we're going to be following up with the federal government, is to ask them to overhaul the recycling labeling system to ensure that only things that are truly recyclable, that have value for counties like us, get the recycling symbol, and that something that isn't does not get it, because it ends up costing us like millions of dollars. And 10 years ago, our recycling made money for the county. Now we're losing money, and the manufacturers are making money. They're making a lot of money, and part of the reason they do is they make us feel good about using all this plastic stuff, thinking that it's recyclable. So anyway, we're calling it our Taking on Plastics campaign. So we're going to continue to look at other plastics to ban. So I mentioned plastic straws and number 6s earlier. So we're going to be looking at other products as well. We're going to be working on the system level, the higher level, with the federal government to work on the labeling system. So people like Stephen and myself are not confused on what plastics are recyclable or not. And then also, before the county council, I don't think they voted on it yet, is a major upgrade to the recycling facility that we have to move to a robotic system, which will make us make a much more efficient sorting system and help us have more value in our stream. Margaret, I see your hand is up.
I'm
And
on. Can you
if
hear
you-
me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Adam, you know I'm engaged when I laugh. Thank you for holding up that can, because I was working with Delegate Sarah Love this session to get a beverage container deposit law into Maryland. And it didn't go through, but we're going to try again next year. And we would love to have your backing on it. It means that the bottles and cans and plastic drink bottles go into recycling instead of ending up on the roadside. Want your backing on that. Second point, the county has hundreds and hundreds of parking lots. My best example is DOT's annex out at Edison Park, which is shaded beautifully by an immense array of raised solar panels. The cars park underneath. The solar panels shade the cars in the summer and they protect them from rain and snow during the winter. And they're doing the function, multiple functions by being up there. Why are we not insisting that solar panels be put up over all our parking lots in addition to rooftops, instead of trying to put them out in the ag reserve where they don't belong?
Love it. Delegate Love, thank you. Thank you for everything. And thank you for laughing at my jokes or laughing at me, whatever
You're
else.
welcome. You're
As
welcome.
long as you're awake, and as long as I'm not putting you to sleep, I'm pleased. So that's good. Delegate Love and I have been in close conversation on all of her bills. She's great. I'm a huge fan of hers, and I think I testified on all of her environmental bills in Annapolis. So working very closely with her. On the solar, what you're describing is solar canopies, and I agree. It's they should be on more parking lots. The problem is that it's so expensive, and when you see solar canopies, 9 times out of 10 they're on a public facility because they're publicly subsidized. When they're ground mounted, like in a rural area or on a green field, much cheaper. So the solar companies make money on it, selling the electricity to the there's a little background noise. I don't know if
Could you take another question about trees?
yeah, I just absolutely. Let me. I just want to finish answering that question.
Oh, okay.
So I agree. So canopies are too expensive. That's why solar developers aren't doing it more. Patty hears me use this phrase all the time, but we're in the workshop in our department now, figuring out how can we make them more affordable. So we've met with, I think 6 or 7 solar developers over the last year and a half, just this question, like, why aren't there more solar canopies? There's like a zillion, that's a conservative estimate, amount of shopping centers in Montgomery. Why don't we have more? And they said, well, they're very expensive, but if we were able to get about 5 acres or more of land to do it, then it becomes more profitable. So we're trying to figure out a system that we can aggregate maybe 3 or 4 or 5 shopping centers into one procurement for a solar developer, and that would drive down the costs. And then also trying to guarantee a buyer, an off-taker, maybe the government, to make sure that the project makes money. So that's more information than you wanted, but
Adam.
But that's the challenge, and that's what we're trying to figure out. Because I agree, I'd rather see us cover every parking lot.
Adam.
Excuse me, Carrie. Joe Awkward had his hand up. You want to ask
Okay.
your question?
And Dick Coffinger.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Joe and Dick. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, great. Tremendous presentation. Learned a lot tonight. I guess the question I had is really impressed about the presentation, and I guess I'm just kind of want to put a word in. Obviously, with it being this progressive, and I'm assuming that some of the businesses might push back. But at the same time, if we can kind of work together with whether they be developers or businesses, I just like to get your feedback on that. I think sometimes, for instance, with the restaurants earlier, I think the county kind of pushed hard on them. And so I'm just kind of hoping I guess, just want to see if there's a way that you feel we can try to work with businesses, because they're going to be the ones that'll be most impacted with a lot of the changes. So I'm just trying to think how we can, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our approach has been, since I've been here, probably before, is that, we work on, we want to push the envelope.
Sure.
I think that's our
Understand.
job. At the same time, we don't want to steamroll over people and folks trying to make a living. So anytime we have a bill, or we're thinking about a bill, we identify all the stakeholders and I meet with them beforehand and hear their input and try to address any concerns that we can. And we may not, at the end of the day, always agree.
Sure.
But they will always say, at least in the time I've been here, they always say, well, we don't agree with the bill, but we appreciate that DEP listen to our concerns and will work with us. So we want to be mindful and we want to listen. An example is the straws. So we want to do the straw ban. And it was actually the restaurants, or the Chamber of Commerce, that suggested a phase in with having it on request first, because they felt that the public should change their expectations before the restaurant changes its business practices. So if the demand for straws goes down, then there's less pressure on the businesses.
Yes.
So that's just a small example of how we try to engage. And then what we find is that two things. There's no monoliths. So some restaurants love the straw ban, some hated it.
Right.
And then the stuff we do in the future, some will love it, some will hate it, but we want to find the ones that are making it work and be like, okay, well, this Founding Farmers has not used plastic straws for 4 years. Lebanese Taverna has not. There'll be resources to the others. And then also, no matter what, even if people don't like the law, we want to work with them.
Yes.
And if they want us to phase in enforcement or do education a certain way with their community, we'll do it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. And by the way, the idea with the straws, making it, request only, I think that was a great idea, because I do think that was a great way of doing that. So thanks.
Yeah. I wish I could take credit for it, but
Okay,
I gotta give it.
Yeah.
Can I go to the question about trees?
Yeah, sorry,
Is there a
Dick.
recognized problem with maple trees, but also other trees? In my community, a good number of the maple trees in front yards, also on the county strip, have died in the last 2 years. If you just went down through my community, you could easily count 10. But on my own property, in the last year and a half, I've lost 5 mature trees. I use no lawn chemicals. Okay, so is it warming, so it's killing off certain maples? But I lost some of these trees are 30-inch in diameter trees. They're not little guys by any means. Is there any recognized problem that's going on that you're aware of?
This is the first I've heard of maple trees. Of course, I've heard stresses for elms, certain types of hollies.
My hollies are doing fine.
I don't know. I'm putting my email address in the chat. Can you send me an email, and then I'll pass it on to our arborist, who will be in touch with you. I haven't heard that with maples. I think maples have generally been more resilient, but I'm not
I mean, you'd be blown away just driving down my street. At any rate, I'll get it. I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Dick. I appreciate that.
Get a question from Carrie and then from Nathalie, please.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, two things real quick. First of all, Adam, I should set you up with my tenant, because he owns the largest canopy solar company in the District of Columbia. He's renting both of my homes for his employees, to be honest with you. So, and we were talking about it the other day. He has got a patent on a system that puts canopies on rooftops. And he's got a manufacturing business that makes the canopies, all right? The standoffs and everything. He said he didn't understand why Montgomery County wasn't doing more canopies and why they wanted to emphasize in the ag reserve, because their system was affordable. I don't know.
Okay.
And the second thing, I read an article in the Washington Post about the Rock Creek. Okay, it indicated that it had a severe problem with E. coli bacteria because of apparently during the late 1900s and early 2000s, or to the mid 2000s, we started out with terracotta sewer systems that are degrading and then are overburdened from development, and then went on to cast iron, which are now collapsing. They're rusting. The only thing that's really keeping it together is the soil around it, but they are bursting as we are increasing development. That article is primarily in the District of Columbia. You said you tested the streams in our waterways. My question for you is that situation the same in Montgomery County for both Rock Creek, the Sligo Creek Creek, and I would argue as far as up as Aspen Hill to the Turkey Branch Stream Valley? Are we having the same situation that this article has suggested? Boy,
Thanks. Great series of questions. You guys are making me work tonight. Just want you to know that. But it's all good. Yeah. So the first part, yeah. Please put that gentleman in touch with me. My email is in the chat. You probably have it already. I'd love to talk to him. And this is per Margaret's point, like a real opportunity. So Rock Creek, there's two things happening, and I invite Patty to jump in if you think that something don't quite get it right. So on the Maryland side, we have a different type of system than Washington, D.C. on our sewage conveyance. But sewage is still a source of pollution in both places. So in Montgomery, there's the older pipe. That's true. And the scouring of the stream bed and the erosion. And historically, sewers have been built alongside rivers because rivers are clearly going downstream using gravity. So it always made sense to build pipes along streams because they would always go with gravity to their outfalls to a treatment plant, downstream, so to speak. And when they were first built, they were built, safely away from the streams. But over century of the scouring, the pipes, if the stream bed was here and the pipe was here, over time the stream bed erodes, and then the pipe is exposed. And some of you may have seen this in different areas. And then without the dirt supporting it, the pipes begin to be compromised. They begin to break. So WSSC is actually under a consent order to place pipe, and that program actually is not completed. I think they still have 5 years left. Patty, you can correct me if I think I'm wrong, but they've already, but they have a robust program where they've passed. I think they're well past the halfway point. So they have made good progress on the Maryland side. On DC, it's a different system, the combined sewer. So the stormwater and the sewage historically have mixed together. And then when the water in Maryland, they're two separate systems, the stormwater and the sewage. In DC, they're combined, going to the Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant. But when there's a storm surge, those pipes and that system gets overwhelmed, and then the sewage spills into local waters. And that's true on the Anacostia side and in Rock Creek as well. So the solution in Washington has been the major tunnel project. primarily. So they, I think it's a $2 billion project, like gigantic mind-boggling numbers, where they're replacing the system with sophisticated tunnel systems that can handle that. So long story short, I applaud all of you that are still awake through that explanation. But yeah, the sewage is a problem, but it is being addressed. It's a historical problem for a variety of reasons, just inferior materials, as well as the stream degradation. But both wastewater utilities, WSSC and DC Water, have pretty robust programs on getting it right. But yes, that is major pollution, Rock Creek, but it is in Washington, DC, if that feels better.
Max has got a question. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah,
Natalie is next.
That's
sorry,
right.
I
Hang
tuned
on,
in late.
Max. Natalie.
Max, wait for Natalie. I'm sorry, Max. Go on, Natalie.
Sorry, just a quick question, just to confirm that there is still some incentive for homeowner to put solar system in their property.
Solar system. I don't know if there's solar. Is there a solar incentive, Patty? I'm not aware of one.
Well,
But I'm aware of.
there used to be a solar system. You could have some kind of help with your taxes, etc. And I was wondering if that continues or if that's finished.
There are federal tax credits, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think the county has anything. I'm not sure they ever did, but we can confirm.
Because that would be really something important for the neighborhoods, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not aware of something either, but one of the good things about residential solar, and I have residential solar, is that it pays for itself. So whether it's leased or you buy the system, the economics are so good with it that one way or another you'll save money. Yeah, but thank you, Natalie.
No, it's just because a lot of people in my street, in fact, are really having problem with the upfront expense. So that's why I was asking.
Got it.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Max.
Sorry, I tuned in late, so I don't know whether you took up the issue about the decision by the Attorney General that trees need to be replaced by trees not reserved somewhere else. Was that discussed already?
We were waiting for you, Max.
Well, the question, are you familiar with what I'm talking about, Mr. Ortiz?
I am.
So if that's the case, what is the county doing about it? Are they replacing trees that are cut down by planting new trees, or are they reserving trees somewhere far away?
Well, we applauded the opinion of the Attorney General. We agree. Actually, we think that overall, many of the forest conservation laws are not as robust as they should be. There's a lot of loopholes that have been exploited over time. So yeah, we absolutely support tree for tree. That is a real tree, not a theoretical tree in a place that there's already a tree. So yeah, we'll be absolutely compliant and making all of our policy making and programming consistent with the new law.
With the new law?
I'm sorry, with the new opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. But we can start from the beginning if you want, just to catch you up, Max, on everything that you meant. Just kidding.
I actually have questions too. I recently read about the electric systems in China, and they to repower, these were cars, but they actually have little stations where you just drive in, they pull out your battery, put in a new one, and you go on your way again. So it takes seconds, I mean, or just like a couple of minutes to do that, and then the people drive again, and so they get a fully charged battery in. And I thought that might be something that could be done with, you're having all these new electric buses. I don't know if that's easy to do or not. Usually you think they're difficult to get at them, but maybe it's something that could be considered, because then they could be in use. You don't have to have them all overnight, recharging again, or however long it would take. The second thing is, maybe the county executive, or you could urge the county executive and the council to have a program where you lose the suits. You know, during the summer, maybe guys could stop wearing suits, and then you wouldn't have to have the building so stinking cold. And then you wouldn't have, you had the commercial buildings, you said, use more energy than any others because they're very, you know, they keep them very cold, and maybe that doesn't need to be quite so cold, a couple of degrees lower. Guys don't need to be wearing jackets, you know, in the summertime. You know, they do that, so they pump, you know, they turn it down and the women are freezing. So I have to carry a jacket around with me wherever I go, because when I go into a building, it's freezing. So, you know, maybe they could have a little campaign there and say, look how environmentally friendly we are, and we're not going to wear suits anymore during the summer.
After all this pandemic, nobody should ever wear a suit again.
Well, I'm all for that, but
I haven't seen a suit in a year, I don't think.
I'm on board with that. Well, I would love to see that article on changing the batteries out. I hadn't heard about that.
I'll try and find where I read it. I don't remember offhand, but it was recently in the last month. So I'll try and find it.
Yeah. And point taken about the temperature in the suits, but I'll have you know that in the Elrich administration, the dress code has been reduced to just having clothes on. Pretty much. Very low bar with Mark for formality, which I think is a good thing.
Okay. Luella, you have a question?
I was just saying, I've seen the same article that Jackie was talking about, or at least a similar one.
Oh.
And one thing it was making the point of was that it probably is the real thing we need to go to in terms of making electric cars really practical for everybody. And the one drawback at this point is every manufacturer, of course, has his own battery. So one of the things would be probably at a federal level, you'd have to do something to encourage a globally, you know, we don't have 50 brands of gasoline. You all put the same gas in the same tank. And, you know, we should try to have something where everybody has the same kind of battery that you can, modules that you can just swap out.
Yeah, I mean, we might be past the point of doing that. It's like cars, you know, no matter what kind of car you have, you can fuel it the same way. The nozzles are the same.
Right.
And I used to work for the National Hydrogen Association, and years ago, they were working on how the nozzles would be on hydrogen powered cars, trying to work out those details before they got systems into place. So, you know, we might have missed the boat on that one, but if you're buying a fleet of electric, you know, buses, that gives you some clout to say we want a kind where we can take them out quickly and replace them. So
the batteries for those buses are going to be huge, so that's not practical. But for little cars, it sounds like it's an interesting solution. Adam, I got a couple of quick questions. Two quick questions, and one which might take a little bit longer to add. One is, does DEP have authority over stump removal throughout the county? Because one of the barriers to planting new trees is the existence of stumps from trees that the county has cut down in the right of way. I don't know if that's a DEP or a DOT thing, but seems to me that you need to pull out some stumps so you can plant some trees, and maybe it's an opportunity to create some jobs for certain people, because the backlog for stumps, I understand, is in the thousands and years. The other question is, I'll just give them all out, is there has been a tax on plastic bags. Have you seen evidence of reduction in plastic bags in stormwater? And then my final question is, what kind of outreach are you doing to communities of color? Because we would really like to enlist them into the kind of stream cleaning, watershed care that we've been doing throughout the county.
Thanks.
That's it.
All great questions. So first on the stumps, we don't have a program for stumps. And I'm not sure about DOTs. It sounds, Alan, like you may know a little bit more than me, but I'm happy to follow up and find out. Patty, jump in if you know something I don't. Not sure, but I mean, of course, it makes sense to remove the stump. It would make it easier to replant. But I can look into that, or Alan, if you have a specific area you want to share with me, a street or something, I'm happy to look into that. Plastic bags, the Montgomery did institute the 5-cent tax on bags. What we saw within the first few years was a remarkable reduction in bag usage. I think to about 60% usage. And Patty, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, I can't quite remember. But since that first drop after the introduction of the law, has stayed pretty consistent. We haven't gone down any further. So per my earlier comments about plastics, the county is looking at banning plastic bags and/or increasing the tax. Those are things that we're in the workshop now looking at. Some of you know that there was a state bill to ban plastic bags, but that didn't make it across the line, and we were watching that before we took on that issue. We have correspondingly, we have seen fewer plastic bags, but there are still too many plastic bags in the environment. Regarding communities of color, I mentioned earlier that we've done an exercise identifying neighborhoods of color that we want to engage on stormwater projects. But actually, we're using that same information on all of our programming. So including recycling, we've already done recycling education programs, curbside programs in those neighborhoods as well. Our energy programs are also going to be focused there, and our community outreach is going to be focused in those areas. As we all know, unfortunately, we go to a lot of these environmental meetings and we look around the room, and it's great to have a lot of white people, but it'd be nice to have a little bit more of a mix. We love white people, but we love all people, and we want all people at the table. And and we don't have all people at the table, and that's we have to be proactive in bringing more folks at the table. So this has been a focus of our department. We established, I think it was July 1st of last year, if I'm not mistaken. It was definitely the summer of last year, an equity working group. Patty has participated in it along with about 20 other members of our staff to figure out how we can do a better job engaging marginalized and vulnerable communities. Actually, today I got the report from our working group on how we can do that better across the department. So so we hear you on that, and we think that's a deficiency that has to be a high priority in addressing. While I have the microphone, Alan, just a couple little things I wanted to announce before you really kick me off of your call is we're really excited about expanding our compost collection in the county. So we've had a commercial compost program for about a year now. We have about 20 businesses that have participated in it, mostly like catering companies, some restaurants, and some beverage companies that have been working with us, and we collect the compost and send it to the composting facility in Prince George's County. So we're keeping that material out of the incinerator, which is really important, and out of landfill for those that have private hauling. So that's important. We're also expanding the program to our residential phase 1 program that folks will be hearing about that later this summer. We're going to be doing a phase 1 curbside compost collection in the Silver Spring area and North Bethesda area. So if any of you are in those areas, stay tuned. You'll be hearing more from us about the county providing curbside compost collection. So that's a big deal. Earlier I was mentioning tax methane, but also food scraps turn into compost and are sold as leaf grow gold, actually, so that it goes back into the soil and in gardens and in farms, landscaping projects throughout the region. So that's a much better use than, of course, throwing it away. But Alan, I think that's all I got. Patty, is there anything else you think that needs to be addressed?
Well, the only thing I'll say is you mentioned the the budget request where to modernize the facility, the recycling facility. And we just actually heard late today that our budget is going to get voted on by the council on Wednesday. So hopefully that decision will get made in support of the budget by Wednesday.
Thanks, Patty. We don't expect them not to support our budget, but if you have a minute to send a note to your council members, please tell them how wonderful the department is and how we should have our budget fully funded.
Yeah, it's actually on the consent calendar, so they're not even planning on debating it. So I think they're going to support it, but that can always help.
Never know, never know.
Well, it's 9:15, so let us take this opportunity to thank you for joining us. We were glad to have you last year, Adam. We learned a lot. We're glad to have you and Patty here this evening. I mentioned to Patty in our phone call that in your presentation last year, you showed us the short film about the video about the recycling project. And you had that lady who was separating the plastics from non-plastics on the conveyor belt. And I hope you've given her a promotion and a raise because that was county service of a county employee.
I still remember that. I think of that often whenever I recycle anything, and that poor woman.
So she needs a big raise, and if we need to send a letter in about that, we'll be glad to do that. So we're going to share lots of information from your website to all of our members, Civics, and so they can send it on to their members and hopefully generate a lot of interest in the trees and the Rainscape programs and the recycling programs. This is an important part of what we do as a Civic Federation, and we're really glad to have you here this evening. So we will invite you back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, it was really my pleasure, Alan. I always like connecting with folks. I love working with you, Alan, and everybody here. We're always a resource. We're working for you, we're serving you. So if you have thoughts or feedback, want to know more about something that we talked about, have a better idea than something we talked about today, we want to hear that too. So please don't be shy. This is all hands on deck to make sure that the county is clean, green, and beautiful. But thanks for having us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Patty.
All right. Have a good evening.
All right. Take care, everybody. Appreciate you.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Well, thank all of our members for hanging with us for the last hour or so. We still have some business, and I understand that what Dick has something he wants to share with us, but let's go to our committee reports. They are usually, thankfully, very brief. We'll just go down the list in alphabetical order, and when we get to land use and planning, I think Dick, is Dick still here? Yeah, there he is. He can share with us what he wants to share with us. Anybody have anything they want to say about education? Our first committee. And as I go through this list, we are looking for chairs and co-chairs of all of our standing committees, and we really would like to have help from the membership on this, because there's a lot of issues to cover and we need help. Anybody have anything on education? I don't see anybody raising their hands. On the environment, well, we've just spoken a lot about the environment. So I think we've had a good share of that this evening. The next one is land use and planning. I don't see Harriet on the call, who is the chair of our land use and planning. So let's open.
What I wanted,
Go ahead.
Alan, what I wanted to discuss pertains to land use and planning.
I was taking the chair for land use and planning, and I was going to recognize you to make your remarks about that. Dick, so go right ahead.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to make a motion, and well, I'll say I move that the Montgomery County Civic Federation opposes further legislative action on the affirmative housing strategies, ZTAs, and the Thrive American 2050 plan until the comprehensive planning required for such fundamental and long-term, long-lasting legislation is completed. And the rationale for all of this is that zoning or rezoning, in order to be supported as a valid enactment of the police power of a local government, must be in the public interest and for the promotion of health, safety, and welfare of the community. All those issues, since local government also acts in the public interest to provide necessary public facilities such as schools, roads, parks, sewer, and water facilities, it's equally imperative and proper that government assess the probable effect on these facilities, both existing and proposed, when considering land use and zoning changes. I.e., we shouldn't be focused on just one area. In promoting the ZTA and the master plan during the pandemic, local government is attempting to avoid these extensive responsibilities. While hidden in the shadows of the pandemic, the local legislature and planning board are using a truncated legislative process dependent on the limitations of Zoom to bring extensive fundamental changes to Montgomery County land use law. And as a background to this, I've been deeply involved in Montgomery County land use for over 35 years. In that time, I have been the lead community spokesman in 19 separate zoning cases in which the county views were upheld in 17 of the cases. In every one of those wins, the public interest was the winning issue that carried us forward. In the very first case in 1985 Parker Farm, we successfully introduced the adequacy of schools as a fundamental finding in approving zoning. And I got the Star Award for that. We also reestablished transportation and stormwater management as determinative issues in granting a zoning. These were very long processes. In every one of the zoning cases, what's important to know is that the staff and the planning board approved the rezonings. The wins came before the hearing examiner and the county council on the public interest legal issues. And the few of those cases that were appealed were upheld by the Montgomery Court of Appeals. So this is a very, very good issue. And it must be remembered that increasing the density of development can produce deleterious results in the form of traffic congestion and safety problems in connection with existing road facilities, or the overcrowding of existing schools. You only have to see additions still being put on schools that were added to 10 years ago, or the overcapaciting of the water, sanitary, sewer, and stormwater facilities. Thus, the public interest would not be served if there is a lack of justification for granting the increase in density. Basically, if you've got all these threats facing you, you really need to do a comprehensive study, area by area, not just giving carte blanche, almost county-wide. Further, the introduction of large quantities of traffic, population, and school students may be an indication of a lack of compatibility of the increased density with the character of the surrounding community. Compatibility, if anybody here has ever argued a zoning case, is an all-important issue. And by the way, the legal issue of compatibility is much broader than just how it looks. And the way, when you read anything that's coming from the planning people, it's like they're putting emphasis on how it looks, not the legal standards. Additionally, increased density, which causes large public investment and has a possible deleterious effect upon the land use and capital planning and program by requiring premature extension of public facilities, can't be in the public interest if it's going to force investments. Well, in summing up, proper planning and rezoning is a highly detailed and time-consuming process. It should be. It must be. It shouldn't be accelerated for political purposes. We must delay the process until the pandemic is fully under control and the people of Montgomery County can fully participate. So, but I think we should act now. You don't let this drag on any further and just confuse it with politics.
Dick, do you have a resolution to present to the membership?
Yes, and that is what I opened with, and that is.
Repeat that, please.
Motion is, I move that the Montgomery County Civic Federation oppose further legislative action on the affirmative housing strategy ZTAs and the Thrive Montgomery 2050 plan until the comprehensive planning required for such fundamental and long-lasting legislation is completed.
I
So
second
Dick,
that.
I second the motion, Joan Beerweiler.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. I'm a little confused about what the language is about this resolution. It's not in the form that we're.
Well, by the way, whereas everybody has their own desires. For many, many years, we didn't need whereases.
Dick, please let me finish what I was going to say. So the executive committee knows how important this is to our membership. We've decided to draft our own resolution for the membership. We were going to wait until after the planning staff has concluded its meetings with its advisory committee on attainable housing. I think you're talking about attainable housing.
Well,
Affirmative.
it's kind of, I talked to staff at Park and Planning.
Right.
This
So
is not a process that has ever been seen before in the county, okay? So all I want to do is make sure in a timely way, as people meet, that the view of the Civic Federation as a whole, and that's the reason, rather than leaving it just to the executive committee, that we move it tonight, that there are people.
We're not leaving it to the executive committee. We've got people who are going to help on this resolution, which we're considered taking up in September. In the meantime, we've already passed resolutions expressing our concerns about the whole Thrive Montgomery process. We're participating in a community coalition on affordable and attainable housing with lots of our members and municipalities in the county. So we're actually doing a lot of work on this issue. So I think that
what could possibly happen with the affirmative housing strategies? Can that be voted on before September?
So right now the status is, this is a discussion, Carrie, so please be patient. So as I understand it, Council President and the Chairman of the Fed Committee have asked Park and Planning, the Planning Department, to come back with an assessment of missing middle housing legislation to present to the County Council. That process is ongoing. That's not going to be voted on anytime soon.
Alan, just as an example,
tomorrow, Dick.
You don't have to wait till the end of a process.
Dick,
People's citizen input has been a regular activity on all the different things.
Dick, please, with respect, tomorrow night, we've invited the planning staff to present us their revise Thrive Montgomery draft to our membership on
Okay,
Zoom.
separate it out. I just ask you to make a separation.
So
Okay,
we've,
is affirmative housing strategies on a faster track than the master plan?
I can ask a question. What do you mean by the master plan? Do you mean the
There is there is. we
Thrive
are-
Montgomery plan?
Well, okay, have you participated in
the general plan,
the general plan? I am sorry for misstating that. Okay, you're correct. The general plan for Montgomery County, set in 1967 with the update, and what is that, 1993, which I went through. And I went to all those meetings in 93. Okay, it ends up, this is an incredibly truncated process. We're not anywhere near the public involvement that was allowed then. In fact, what they're really trying to do is keep us out. And what's the history of all of this? I gave you an example of 19 zoning cases. It ends up the planning board and the planning board, they go along with their thoughts on things, but they have often absolutely failed to follow the law. It's the reason why I was able to win 17 out of 19 zoning cases. They just ignore it. But
All
you
right.
go before the hearing examiner, who was an administrative law judge, and he went through the whole thing. And
So my recollection is that we need to even consider this motion. This is an emergency motion. We need the votes
we're
of
building on the motions that have been made before.
5 of.
Well, let's see if we get the 5 of,
Okay.
3
We need
more people.
5 organizations to agree to just consider this before we even vote on it.
Can we have a little more discussion first?
I'll be the third motion.
On the 4.
I'm 5, Paul.
Okay. Now, may I speak, Alan? So far, I've heard you and Karen, talk. I'd like to say a few things. First of all, this process has had very minimal public participation. Unlike any master plan, I've participated in over a dozen local master plans, and I also participated in the general plan refinement. Just the rollout for the general plan refinement back in, I forgot, 1980, 81, 1990, right? It's 89, 90, I think it was.
No,
there were several hundred people the first day. There were thousands of people that were involved, and we met at the Silver Spring Armory. I mean, all the stakeholders in this county were involved. In this situation, we've got a few meetings on Zoom. We've got people who monopolize, the meetings. Most of the discussion is done in chat. And I got to tell you something. Mr. Jason Santori himself admitted it's not a comprehensive process dealing with the attainable housing strategy. It's attainable, Dick, not affirmative. It's attainable housing strategy.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's all right. But the bottom line is, what we have here is a runaway train. We have a limited amount of time this summer during a pandemic to gather the residents of this county, of which everyone I've talked to has opposed this, every association I've spoken to, and we need to rally them around. And who else to rally around? Who better to rally around than the Civic Federation? So I think that Dick's motion is timely. It is appropriate, and I think we should vote on it, to be quite honest with you. We've had articles in the newsletter, several. We've had presentations from the staff, and that in and of itself, I actually told Jason Sartori, the planning staff is like Comcast TV. They've got 100 different channels, and they change their story with every group that they talk to. It's absurd, and I listened to Actually, I had someone listen to Hans Reimer at the Smart Growth Coalition meeting. He specifically said, that he wants to have the ZTAs approved before the summer break. He said that after the summer break starts an election season and things change, was his words, if I understood understood the person properly. Look, the Federation needs to step up to the plate. It's that simple. And I think Dick's right on target. I've said enough. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay,
Okay.
so I
And
take.
Carrie, you may
I
not
take-
believe this, but I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you substantially. I have been planning on writing something to them, which says something along the lines of, look, a lot of what you're proposing here was based on thinking that was pre-pandemic. And I think that we've had a huge, not a thought experiment, but a reality experiment that we're halfway through in terms of what's going to happen with our work life, our travel life, all of our life, when we found out we can operate in a much different fashion. Part of my question is, I'm just not entirely sure of what Dick's criterion is for when you could take this back up again. And that's one of the things I'd like to clarify somewhat.
Who takes it back up?
But my thinking is somewhat the same, is that I think they really need to stop back and, do some reports on this, do some thinking, put some thoughts and recommendations to the county. But yes, I would agree that I don't think it is time at this point, and certainly not before the end of June.
Karen.
to be doing this.
may I
I
respond
guess
to
my
you,
sense,
Karen?
I'd like to refine somewhat more what you're talking about, Dick, but I think.
Well,
Karen,
what
I don't
it
know if I'm-
is, in a zoning case.
give me a second.
You said you're going to be quiet for a while, Carrie.
All
just
right,
to say,
go for
okay?
it.
But the bottom line of it is, when you're presenting a zoning case, you go through every one of the areas of special interest or public interest. And what you do is you see whether or not this particular rezoning makes sense. And that first big case of mine, which was Parker Farm, we knew the high school was overcrowded. How does it make sense to build 340 new dwelling units? The road, Lay Hill Road, was supposed to be
Could you let Buddy in?
rebuilt at some point, but they still didn't have the schedule for it. Yet the construction and rezoning was going full bore. It turns out stormwater management, the way the land was laid out, where they had a stormwater management pond, it was built to a 10-year storm. Well, I ended up getting somebody from U.S. Department of Environmental Protection to he got some data that proved that 10-year storms were happening multiple times a year in Montgomery County. And we got an oversized stormwater management pond built, but it's still, it's not every year anymore, but every 3, 4, 5 years, that thing goes all the way up to the top. And when it spills onto a school lot, but it could spill all the way down onto houses. These are real issues, but that's the way I presented my cases. I presented what I'll say is scientific cases. I'm trained in science, not in the law, but I got enough guidance from other people that I pulled out law books and figured out how you present a case. And that's how I won.
Okay, Karen, I'd like to say one thing. I don't know
They're
if you
real
looked,
issues.
I don't know if you looked at the team file. I actually pasted in there the regional district act's vision for granting the district council's authority and the planning board's authority. When they write a master plan, it must be comprehensive. When they enact legislation that addresses the issues related to that master plan, it must be comprehensive. This team has not wanted to address stormwater management. public safety with respect to the automobiles on roads and potentially safety vehicles trying to get through these roads with the drastic increase in public parking. They haven't wanted to address schools, transportation modes with respect to only 5% of the public uses buses. The demographics show that this new paradigm is going to call for 1.3 cars per unit. This is a ludicrous process. The staff is refusing to, they've turned a blind eye to everything that a master plan and that comprehensive zoning is all about. And let me tell you something. Zoning isn't just about telling you where your property line is. Zoning deals with the public safety and of the entire county. Without proper zoning, anything can happen. And that's what made Montgomery County great. Is we had a wonderful zoning system. We didn't always win, but it was comprehensive. It included public participation. This process is, I'm sorry, it's a joke. There's no other way to put it. That's it.
This is Jerry. I'd like to comment. I was with the Civic Federation back in 1993 when we fought some of this. And we're the Civic Fed, if we don't stand up for this, no one else in the county is going to stand up for it. And you have major problems that they're trying to ram something through in the midst of a pandemic without stopping and thinking how it's going to do. I spoke to Mr. Santori. I asked him about the traffic. Oh, well, we haven't really looked at it. Well, if you don't look at adding 20% more traffic, how many more ICCs you want to build? How many more other roads? Where is all the traffic going to go? And they have this mistaken notion that everyone in this here is going to commute into downtown DC to their offices. We've seen that 80% of the traffic is not related to commuting. We see that we've had peak traffic recently. Almost every Saturday has been a peak traffic day, more than weekdays. They just have no comprehension that we don't have any capability for meeting the Saturday traffic. The roads are overcrowded. So what do? We stop counting traffic on Saturdays and we assume that there is no traffic on Saturdays. This whole thing needs to be stopped soon, or else we're going to get a lot of people moving out of this place.
All right, you guys. So I take offense, Carrie, when you say we haven't done anything, because we've done a lot. I personally spent scores of hours on this with community groups across the county. I'll remind you that we passed a resolution on September 14th on this very issue.
I wasn't referring to you, the Federation.
Carrie,
I was
please,
referring to the staff of the Park and Planning Commission.
Carrie, please let him
with
finish.
some respect, Carrie, with some respect. We passed a resolution in September of last year that deals with these issues about public participation, community engagement, and postponing the consideration of the general plan until after, for at least a year and until after the public pandemic, which sounds like it goes to the kinds of things that Dick is talking about. We've been working on this, and like I said, we're bringing in the planning board chair and the staff tomorrow to talk to all of us about the changes from the last time I testified at the public hearing on the general plan Thrive 2050.
Where is the meeting tomorrow night going to be held?
It's a Zoom conversation that we're sponsoring at 7.
Oh, it's a Zoom conversation.
Right. Yeah. So everybody, is you got to notice from Harry, the end of last week that we're doing this meeting and the meeting tomorrow. They wanted to come back and explain the changes they made between when I testified at the public hearing for the planning, the planning department, last few months ago, last fall. They changed it. They want to come back and tell us. We get to raise the same kind of issues. I agree with everybody that this is a complex issue and that the Civic Federation, is going to be an important voice in this. We decided that it made sense to at least to hear everything. I think Karen talked about getting into some of the granular detail of their attainment housing policy. I've already raised questions with them how the affordable housing piece that they were talking about, the missing middle, doesn't even scratch the surface of the 40,000 new housing units that they've committed to. So they are offering us a pig in the poke. We all agree that this needs to be postponed, should be postponed. We don't think it is, but we need some time to come up with a detailed resolution with recommendations about how we think this process should proceed. So I think that Dick's resolution is untimely because we've got other things going on. And anybody on this call and anybody else who's a member of the Civic Federation is welcome to participate in this process. We can really fully document and clearly articulate what our issues are. We've already said that it's been rushed and there hasn't been enough community engagement. For us to be taken seriously, we need to weigh in on lots of different things about zoning, master planning, stormwater, tree canopy.
By the way, are you only, just for clarification, are you talking about general plan or are you also talking about the ZTAs?
Well, we want the
ZTAs has an incredible impact on the general plan.
Yes, we've also, yeah, so we're involved in that process too, and we don't like the one size fits all.
But what, how do you stay? Okay, would it, because I'm talking about opposing further legislative action on both. Now, are you separating out that I'm too early on the general plan, but I'm timely on the ZTA, and I'm not even sure if it's one or two. I mean,
You just muted yourself. So you just muted yourself, Dick. We can't hear you. You muted yourself. There you go. Oh.
I keep getting unmuted. Somebody.
Now you're fine. You're fine now.
Okay. What I'm trying to clarify, the discussion right now between us, is it only on the ZTAs, only on the general plan, or is it both? Because what I'm absolutely saying is that action immediately on the ZTAs is entirely appropriate. Time is going fast. You could be correct in holding off a little bit on the general plan.
We expressed a view about the general plan. The ZTAs got sent back to the planning board for.
But it could be on a fast track. Let them know right now.
I move the question.
Okay, let's vote on what's here today.
All right, as recording secretary, I'm gonna ask one more time. I got the first half of it. I'm trying to figure out that I've got this properly the way you want it said. Not to take further action on the Thrive Montgomery plan until the what exactly?
No, I'm not saying anything. Oh, okay. Until the comprehensive planning required for such fundamental and long-lasting legislation is completed. In other words, they haven't really done a thorough job on the impacts. They talk about how if it's
we agree with that. What's the text?
Oppose.
We're opposed.
All right, I'm going to read it back. Okay, this is what we're going to have.
How about you just, Karen? You might cut off again. Karen, why don't you hear what I say?
I am. I'm just trying to read it back to you to make sure that what I have written down here is what you were trying to say. Okay, I'm just trying to be a good secretary. Moves that the MCCF opposes further legislative action on the Attainable Housing Strategy (ZTAs) and the Thrive Montgomery 2050 plan. Plan? Is that the term?
Plan.
Yeah. Until the comprehensive planning required for such fundamental and long-lasting legislation is completed?
Yes. You got it. You're a good secretary.
May I add one thing to that? and more public, and the public is, and more of the public is allowed to participate
Okay.
in such an important
I will
process.
take that as a friendly amendment, and it's just until the planning required is completed and a more open public process
Thank you.
is also completed.
Or how about until the comprehensive planning and public input required for such?
No, don't say
No, not
public input.
required. Uh-uh.
I want to have,
I talked to Norman Knopf, and he agreed. He agrees that this is clearly unfair. But as a lawyer, he said, if the staff only talks to 2 or 3 people, they've talked to the public.
Okay, so tell me again what your part is, Carrie, then?
Until many more members of the public across Montgomery County are allowed to participate.
And how many is many
And the-
more? That's just too vague.
yeah.
Well, then you help out, Jackie. I mean, I can use help. I'm not the brightest bulb.
We changed it to significantly more.
Yeah, significant open public process.
Great. Okay.
Let me try that again. The planning thing is completed and there is a significantly more open public
No,
process?
it's just a significant open public process. We can't say, yeah, an open public process. I think that means people can come and we do something more than Zoom. I mean, Zoom, my wife is a teacher. You think many people, this is half-assed when you're trying to go into such deep issues. I'll give you I'm beating this to death. Yeah.
The question's been
Okay,
called.
call a question.
There's a friendly amendment.
Yep.
Karen, do you understand what the language
Okay.
is?
So right now I have the legislation is completed and there's a significant open public process,
Yes.
period.
Yes.
That's a friendly.
How about significant open public process after the pandemic has been resolved?
Okay.
After the pandemic, that way people can participate. That's the biggest hamper in this whole thing. Biggest problem.
Probably more people are
about it,
participating
Karen?
during the pandemic because it's easy to get to these meetings and they're all done and you don't have to show up in public, but
No, they watch. They don't participate. There's a big difference. I
I
gotta tell
signed
you.
up for a thing where there was 50 to 75 people testified, so anyway. Do we want to put, do we know what our criteria is for when the pandemic ends?
There's going to be a public declaration about that by the governor. Governor's going to declare that the emergency is over, so that's what we would be talking about.
So you want that in there as a significant open public process after the pandemic
How
emergency is?
about clarifying that the pandemic is over when the public can meet again in person?
That's really your criteria, not the pandemic. Significant open public process where the public can participate in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Significant open process
Yes,
whereby the
yes.
public can meet in
Yes,
person.
I don't know if I'm
You're
on, or
on.
no, I'm.
Okay,
Okay,
So it's been moved and seconded. There's been discussion. There's a friendly amendment which has been accepted by the author. When the question's been called, all those in favor of this resolution, please signify by raising your hand.
I can't, but yes.
Choose yes in your reactions then.
I love you,
There's a
Jackie.
Yeah.
choice of a yes or a no.
Dick
I
Coffin
got
just
it.
says yes.
I got my hand up.
wait a minute. Okay, I'm counting Joan. Okay, Joan's 1, Joe's 2, Peggy's, actually, when I say it, put your hand down.
Okay,
All right, everybody keep your hand up, and when I say your name, then you can put it down. I'm gonna keep track. Okay, Joan, Jackie, Dick, Jerry, are you voting yes?
Jerry, yes.
Peggy, Natalie, Joe, okay, Luella,
Abstain.
okay, Joe, okay, back to 6, okay. Paul, okay, that's 7.
9.
Carrie?
Yeah,
8? 8 or 9 anyway.
it's 9.
Who was 9? Anyway.
Count it over again.
Carrie, be quiet. Let the secretary do her job.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Jeff, are you voting one way or the other?
I'm
At least-
against, I'm against.
Okay. Joyce, did you vote?
I don't have authority to vote unless my board tells me I can, so I'm abstaining.
And Patricia, did you have any vote? I think that's the only ones I had left.
I don't know that I have authority to vote because I'm just representing someone.
Okay. So I
Alan?
count 8 votes yes at this point. Let me write
Okay.
that down here a second.
Those opposed? I'm opposed.
Okay, Alan's an opposed.
Karen's opposed.
Jeff's
I am
opposed.
probably going to abstain since I'm on this panel actually myself, but anyway. Jeff?
Opposed?
Okay, anybody else taking a vote?
I'm opposed.
Yeah, I got you and Jeff as being opposed.
And then you've got Luella and you are abstaining.
Luella can't vote. She's an independent member. She's not representing a civic.
Okay,
She has no vote.
okay, and Natalie?
I represent the president, so cannot
Okay,
abstain.
Then the tally is, the motion passes.
yeah. I think I'm just going to abstain, as I say, since I'm on this panel, and B, I'm still a little ambivalent about the exact way it's worded as opposed to the fact that I will probably.
What is the criteria for approval if it's an emergency?
Yeah,
resolution?
majority.
5.
The majority, once it's got accepted by 5 delegates for consideration. So I think we're fine. I just ask anybody in the future, if you've got a resolution, especially of import like this, that you try to send it to us in advance so we can print it and share it with delegates, because besides the executive committee, we're down to 16 people on this call, and that's not really reflective of the Civic Federation.
Right.
Can I just concur with that? We've got 8 people voting positive, and the Civic Federation has now made a substantial commitment against further consideration of these ETAs under the current circumstances. I think that is a rather significant and potentially unfortunate vote by a small number of members.
Say that I think legislative action in my mind, and maybe Dick, if you want to revote, would be actually passing something as opposed to discussing, having hearings, considering any number of things. I think is not what I would consider legislative action. I mean, if you disagree with me on that, Dick, maybe
The
we should know about
legislative
that.
action that I'm talking about is the actual bringing something to a vote, okay?
I've sat in on 5 or 6 Zoom meetings, of which, as Karen said, there were 40 or 50 people present. How many more people do you think are going to show up at in-person meetings for further discussion of this?
In today's world, I can't tell you, but it ends up as somebody that spent a good bit of his life down at Park and Planning, so much so people thought I was. I'll give you an example. When they changed the rules, the section of the zoning ordinance on subdivision, we had probably 20, 25 people that met for a year, once a month for half a day on a Friday, okay? I mean, people turned out for this, and this, I'll give it a time frame. This is the early 2005 or so, okay? I'm not as active, but I was president of the Civic Fed 92 to 94. There's probably not a position in the Civic Fed that I haven't seen, okay?
Hey, Dick,
Things get passed this way, okay?
All right.
Dick, will you?
I
Paul,
just
you wanna
wanted
say
to
something?
defer to the president. We've had this motion, we debated it, we discussed it. It's 10 o'clock. Can we kind of wrap it up, and we can always revisit it next month?
Well, next
No,
month,
it's passed.
No, it's passed. You can conduct
when you
business,
have-
you can talk about it, but it's 10 o'clock. Let's wrap it up.
So just anything about public finance as we continue our committee reports about about transportation. Jerry,
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment. Can we invite everyone or the 16 people who are on right now to tomorrow night's meeting?
well, I was going to do that anyway.
Well, Jackie
yes.
reposted
Okay, all
the
16 of
link
us
right
should
on
be
the
invited
chat.
to tomorrow night's meeting.
We're going,
Transportation, basically, they've provided free ride-on bus service at least through July. The traffic is back to basically normal. We saw on Friday, which is the latest date for traffic, the peak traffic was between 6 and 7 a.m., which indicates that we're getting congestion after 7 a.m. every day of the week. The traffic is pretty much back to normal, but mass transit ridership is up to 15% of normal. That's it for transportation meeting now. And please look at if you hadn't watched it, please go on to the Montgomery County Civic Federation's website and look at the presentation that SHA gave.
Yeah, I mean, I'd only say that when I go in the office now, once a month, I drive in because it's once a month and because I'm not going to bother taking the subway one day out of a month. But if it was going every day and if traffic was back to normal, most of us would probably be back on the subway. But in any case.
so as we conclude, I want to thank all of our past presidents for joining us, Peggy, Carrie, Bailey, Dean, and Dick. So that's quite a representation. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
Been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you all. It was a good meeting.
See you tomorrow.
Yep.
We stayed awake.
That we did. We didn't fall asleep in this meeting.
Good night.
Good night, all.